Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Stapledon, and I've got another one of these talks on behalf of the Friends of Williamson's Tunnels for you. I've been struggling to find new subjects for these talks, but while I was flipping through folders of photos on my computer a week or two back, I came across something I'd sort of forgotten about. Over the years, Friends of Williamson's Tunnels have done quite a lot of filming with TV program makers. We've done a lot with radio, local and national and international, and we've made quite a number of, or we've participated in quite a number of programs and in the print media. We're getting quite used to it over the years. But anyway, it was in 2020, August 2020, that we had quite a busy time when we actually had two film crews down within 10 days to make segments for TV programs. Now, on the 2nd of August 2020, which was a Sunday, we had a film crew from STV Television, Scottish television company, who wanted to make a program in the series of the Antiques Road Trip. They have a number of presenters on this program. One of them is Natasha Ruskin-Sharp, and this is her here with Lynn when they had arrived at about 10 o'clock in the morning on this particular Sunday. We knew from experience that when these people come along, anything that's going to end up with just a few minutes of airtime can take up to a whole day to record, or sometimes longer. So we knew we were in for quite a long haul. On this occasion, Chris Isles and myself were going to share the interviewing with the program makers, and Natasha Ruskin-Sharp, of course, is the presenter, or one of the presenters on that show. Very friendly girl, Scottish, and very pleasant. And we had a bit of a laugh before we got started. The issue was with Big John Highland, because it was a normal day for the workers. Mind you, I've got to say, this was at a time when we had all been locked down under COVID lockdown rules since March, I believe, of 2020. And in August, we were still in the process of coming out of the first lockdown. It was a very strange time. It's surprising how quickly you can forget these things, but it was a horrible time for everybody. We were being gradually let loose from the first lockdown, but it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process. And these filmmakers were quite wary about being seen to be out and about and mixing with other people without wearing face masks and getting too close to people and all this sort of thing. So we were all rather on edge, but they were able to make the film, which is the main thing. Now here on this photo, before we got started, I'm on the left with Chris Isles next to me here. Chris and I shared the interviewing. Eric and Lynn in the middle. Next to Lynn on the right is Mike Rogers, who was along to do some of the photography of the shots that we've got to show this day. And there's Natasha Ruskin-Sharp on the right-hand side. So once we got going, these people had not come down beforehand to do a recce. So they were coming in blind to something that they knew nothing about. They were filming in Liverpool anyway. And this was going to be, I would imagine, a little sidestep during the main business of filming for an antiques program, a little aside, a little interest on the side. Whether they thought they were going to see any interesting antiques, I don't know, but they'd obviously picked up on the fact that we had been digging out items for years down below in Paddington, and they wanted to come along. So to start off with, Natasha wanted to go down and see the banqueting hall. So we took her down there. And the way they did it, she sort of wandered in, or on screen. It looked as if she was just wandering down below through the kitchen area, the sunken backyard, down the stairs into the sandstone chamber, and then finding her way down the gash and into the banqueting hall where she met up with Chris, who was supposedly there working, moving some bricks around, and she walks in and meets up with Chris. So all a bit staged, but this is how they did it. So she's in the process of walking through. Now, she had a film crew of 3. This gentleman here is the director, I think, and also the cameraman. The other 2 members of the crew look after the sound recording and the lighting. They did it all between them. So now she's down there in the banqueting hall, and she's interviewing Chris, and he's telling her all about what the tunnels are about, where she is, and what she's standing in at this point. And I think they spent quite a bit of time down there filming. And then here we are up on the way out, coming back out of the kitchen area and back up to the surface again. And then, of course, she wanted to go up to Paddington and see what we had there. This, I assumed, would be the main part of what they wanted to film, because they knew they were going to see perhaps quite a lot of interesting artifacts that we dug out, but they probably didn't have much idea of exactly what they were going to see, or even what the area they were going into would look like. Maybe they looked at our website, but that's about as far as it would have gone. So here we are on the surface discussing what's going to happen before we go down below. And then there we are on level 2. She spent a lot of time on level 2, wandering around, and Chris and I shared the interviewing down there, but fact is, Chris gets very flustered when he's got a camera pointing at him. Poor man, he doesn't like it one little bit. He's had to do it over the years, but he's never enjoyed it. And he fully admits that he gets quite flustered, trips over his words, and asks, please, can we do that again? Please, can we do that again? So I've found that I'm perfectly happy facing a camera, and it doesn't bother me. So gradually I've got pushed in further and further and end up doing a lot of these interviews. Chris is quite happy standing behind his camera. So whenever he wasn't being filmed, he's there taking some wonderful shots in the background. And one of the reasons I wanted to show this in this slideshow is that when I look back at it, a lot of the photographs that Chris has taken, this is one of Chris's, and that Mike Rogers have taken when he was available and Chris was being interviewed, are really what I think rather superb shots. Some of them are the sort of shots you wouldn't normally take if you were just taking photographs of the chambers. But of course, when they're doing that, they have to be very careful to be unobtrusive, stay in the background, keep a low profile, don't make any noise, and just grab the shots as you can from wherever you're able to stand. So that's how they've done it. And I think some of these shots have turned out really nice. Natasha here, of course, looking at the displays with all the best of all the materials that we've dug out of this place, and discussing it with me. And I think in the long run, she was not particularly impressed. There's nothing here of any great value. As we've always said, we're very proud of all this stuff that we've dug out of Paddington and we have on display, but we view it all as being pretty much a history lesson of things that have been discovered, buried down there from maybe mid-Victorian times right up until 1939, when the Williamson buildings were demolished. But they're interesting, but perhaps not what a real antiques expert is looking for. But anyway, it wasn't supposed to be an antique slot as such. This was really much more about just a little sidestep while filming in a real antique shop in Liverpool. Lots of questions, but I can't remember what they were now. Obviously, we were talking about the artifacts that we discovered, but also very much talking about the tunnels themselves and how they came about, and the actual structures and the design of them. And here's Natasha with Gordon Hunter, our chairman. I'm not quite sure when Gordon came down. This was on a Sunday. He must have visited at some point during the day. So I really can't remember whether Natasha met up and had a chat with Gordon before the filming or after the filming had finished. But anyway, it was quite a long day before we all got away. It was a normal working day, but there were only probably half a dozen of us on site doing maintenance jobs. There were no visitors at that time. We hadn't started taking visitors again after lockdown, so we were just doing maintenance jobs. So when they left, after what felt like quite a long, hard day to us, we know that they had to go off and start filming in an antique shop. So the day was far from over for Natasha and her film crew. So that was that. But no more than 10 days later, on Wednesday, the 12th of August, we had a film crew with us from a company called Like a Shot Entertainment. And they'd come to film for the Yesterday channel for an episode of a program called Abandoned Engineering. Here we are at the beginning when they'd arrived about 9 o'clock in the morning. They'd been staying overnight in Liverpool, so they were fresh there at 9 o'clock, and we had opened up earlier to have everything ready for them at both sites. Again, these people had come in cold without having visited for a recce or knowing anything very much about us other than what they could find out on the internet. So quite a job, really, not knowing what you're coming into. So we're standing here at the back of our site, and we're demonstrating how we will socially distance, keeping at least 2 meters apart from each other at all times. And in fact, the film crew, a lot of the time while we were below ground, kept their face masks on as well. Obviously, we couldn't be interviewed or talk on screen with face masks on, and I would have refused to wear one anyway. But here we've got with Chris on the left and me in the middle doing my socially distanced thing with arms outstretched. On the right of me is James, who was the director, who was also the cameraman for this crew. And on the far right is a lad called Chris, who was the sound man. And the third member of the team, I think, arrived a bit later. He didn't arrive with these two, so he's not in the shot. He was another James. And we found out later that his main job was taking stills and photography of the actual below ground chambers. But he also did a lot of work with a drone, some brilliant drone footage, which he did above ground here looking down on our site, and also down in the banqueting hall, and more drone footage in the lowest level at Paddington. Very, very effective. The drone takes shots that would never be seen in any other way, and it really does look good. So they wanted to go up to Paddington first, so we wandered up the road with all the gear. Chris and I and the crew of 3. But by this time, Chris has decided that he just couldn't take any more in front of the camera. And so it was agreed that I would do the interviewing. And Chris kept very much in the background and did a lot of great photography to record the process. So we're standing in Paddington here outside our gates. And the process here, of course, is they want to film me walking up the road, reaching the gates, undoing the padlock and walking in, and then going down below ground. And so here we are discussing how that's going to be done. And these lads have made life a bit more difficult for themselves than it would normally be. For something like this, they would usually put a tiny little lapel microphone on me, or whoever was being interviewed, connected to a little pack that just clips on your belt out of sight. And then they wouldn't have to worry about the sound recording. It would all be very easily done. These lads decided they didn't want to risk even getting close enough to me to put a lapel microphone on. And so they decided they were going to do it the old-fashioned hard way. So this lad, Chris, here, is working with a boom microphone. It's quite a process, always being close enough to get the sound you need, but always being out of sight of the camera. Not an easy job, I don't think, but that's how they did it. So here we are. We're about to make the great entrance into Paddington here. So I'm walking up the road. reaching the gates. I'm going to undo the padlock now and walk in. And of course, James is in there ready, waiting to see me come in. And then before going down below, they wanted to take a shot of me looking through the railings and pointing out where the tunnels reach underneath the car park for the student flats. So I'm pointing halfway across the car park there and saying that the tunnels stretch right over there towards the building, and they go 60 feet down in the ground. Then we go down below and down to level 2, down the staircase there. And then there was a good bit of filming in level 2 during the morning. Obviously, the system is completely different with this filming process. They don't use a presenter. So I'm not walking around talking to another person as such, but they're recording me as I go. And the way they do it, they have a system where they're recording me answering all the questions that the director has asked of me, but he's not in view, and nor is anybody else. But they have a group of I would say 3 or 4 expert talking heads who have been briefed. They've never been near us, but they've been briefed on what the tunnels are all about, and they've listened to all the answers that I've given to all the questions, and they talk about what's being shown on screen as we go around. So it's a very different system from being accompanying a presenter like Natasha Raskin-Sharp. So here, James will have a whole series of questions that he wants to ask written on a piece of paper, and he'll stop at one point and tell me what the next question is, so I can think about how I'm going to answer it, and then we'll film it. So I'm filled in several different areas here while they get me to answer specific questions that they've been asking. There you can see Chris there holding the boom microphone down at my waist level while the cameraman is getting the top half of me. That boom has got to be always out of sight. Here they've got me looking up at the spot where we broke into the Paddington Cellars in 1999. The hole in the brickwork up there is being pointed out for them, part of one of my answers to a question. I quite like the way Chris has done these photographs. He's lurking in a corner well away from the filming, but it makes for a nice shot. You wouldn't normally take a picture like this, but I think it works very well. This is the other James, the third member of the film crew, and he's going around taking close-up shots at this point of various artifacts on the displays. He's done a lot of that. I'm not quite sure how much of it was actually used, but he's filming right, left, and centre, stills and video footage all over the place. Quite nice shots, I think. Not quite sure what he's doing there. He may be just studying a piece of footage that he's taken before he moves on. I'm not sure, but it looks a bit strange taking pictures of the floor. I'm not sure whether that's what he's doing. But there were a lot of pictures taken of the displays themselves. I'm sure an awful lot of the footage ends up on the cutting room floor. For a whole day's filming, with this, we ended up with about 12 minutes on screen. This abandoned engineering usually involves visits to 3 places or 4 places, which could be scattered all over the world, and they flit from one to another through each program. And our segment of this particular episode of Abandoned Engineering lasted for about 12 minutes for a full long day's recording. But they're very impressive. It's amazing how much they managed to get in. Altogether, they crammed so much in a few minutes. James here is taking some kind of a video in the Arch to Nowhere. Not quite sure what that's about. And then it was down to the house site again, and they wanted to go down below the house site and into the banqueting hall. So here we are in the kitchen area I'm obviously being asked questions as we walk through the kitchen area and going back to the sunken backyard there and pointing things out as we go and being recorded most of the time, I think. It's all me, I'm afraid, unfortunately. I wish somebody else was involved in this, but nobody else seems to want to stand in front of the cameras. So we're on our way now down to the sandstone chamber and then the banqueting hall. But actually, I don't remember any filming in the banqueting hall at all. Unless there were no photographs taken while we were down there, it's possible that they filmed down there, but they didn't actually do any interviewing. I really can't remember, because now, after doing all that and taking up most of what we thought was a full day, they wanted to go back to Paddington. So here we are now, we're filming back at Paddington in the level 4 chamber. And I know that the second James did an awful lot of filming with the drone in here, and he did it in the banqueting hall as well. I think perhaps he did that while we were somewhere else. But a lot of drone footage was taken down here. I've blown these photographs up on the screen and tried to identify where the drone is. He's there with the control box and looking up at the walls, and I imagine the drone is flying up there above his head somewhere, but I'm afraid I haven't been able to identify exactly where it is. These drones fly around quite quietly. They usually have a little green light underneath which flashes so that you can see where it is, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, a lot of drone footage was taken and it looked very impressive in the final program. He's looking up there again to near the ceiling, and I'm sure the drone must be up there somewhere. And there, a final shot. This is Chris Isles. It's not one of the team. I'm not sure when he got the opportunity to do this, but Chris has obviously set up his camera on a tripod at the end of the bottom chamber and set it to do an automatic shot, because he's photographed himself there. Maybe that's at the end of the session. And just a couple of short pieces of film from this program.
A subterranean network, undisturbed for over a century. A time capsule on a grand scale.
This is one of the best kept secrets in Britain, really. I actually studied in this town and knew nothing about it in the late 90s. It's a secret that was kept for over 100 years.
Very effective, I think. And the last one
Nearly
here.
2 centuries after Joseph Williamson's death,
Brilliant
the
drone
legend of
photography.
his tunnel still captures the imagination of Liverpudlians. And the search for the truth continues.
We believe that there are other spaces which are a lot bigger. There's a great tunnel which we know of, and we hope it still exists, and we're having great trouble trying to find it. And we haven't been able to find a way into it yet, but we're determined to find it.
So that's about it. For a whole day's filming, we got about 12 minutes on screen, but we can't complain because they did cram an awful lot in, and it was well worth viewing, I think. This was a very long day, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't get away until about 9 o'clock in the evening. I don't know how these lads have the stamina to do this, and they're probably off the next morning to another location to film something else completely. So I think they do a brilliant job. So well done to these lads. So that's about all I've got to show you. Hope you found that slightly interesting. Sorry it was all me, but there you go. So thanks very much for watching.